It's going down. H-Town. Hiram Clark. B.Scott.
B.Scott from Hiram Clark.
All right, welcome to the B Block Podcast. I am your host, Brandon Scott. Make sure if you haven't already that you subscribe, rate, review, leave some comments about the podcast if you will. I appreciate you for being here. Got a few things to get to. Obviously, we just had the Super Bowl. Kansas City Chiefs defeat the San Francisco 49ers 25-22 in overtime and win their third Super Bowl in 5 seasons. We're going to talk about that. I also want to go over my experience on Radio Row. It's my first Radio Row experience, and I was in Las Vegas for the entire week leading up to the Super Bowl. It was a good time. I'm sure a lot of you were able to follow it through social media, what we were doing on our accounts for Sports Radio 610, and of course our shows from there. But got some stories from Las Vegas that I want to share with you, and we'll do that in a little bit. But let's start with the Super Bowl. And we are recording this not quite 24 hours after the Super Bowl, but in decent enough time since the Super Bowl has happened. We've been able to digest it, react to it, consume some reaction. And I've had a really good time listening to the local markets, the Kansas City market, which is obviously much more celebratory than the Bay Area market, being Chiefs fans and, having this dynasty solidified. But I got a couple of things on this, man. First of all, I think the big story here, and I'm not breaking new ground on this one, but it's obviously what the Chiefs have done from a historical standpoint and where this puts the Chiefs in the pantheon of not only just establishing a dynasty, but in the pantheon of other dynasties. I think that this Super Bowl was for the Kansas City Chiefs about separating themselves from all of the other contending teams of their era. Like, I think that if you win 3 Super Bowls in 5 seasons, that five seasons is long enough to be an era within itself. I know we think of eras as being more of a decade thing. We do the all-decade teams, and that's the way we look at it. But if you win 3 Super Bowls in 5 seasons, I think that is enough to say that you dominated your particular era. So this is the Chiefs separating themselves from the San Francisco 49ers, separating themselves from the Cincinnati Bengals, separating themselves from the Philadelphia Eagles to a lesser extent as a team that, won a Super Bowl, I guess, 6 or 7 years ago, but has competed against them in a Super Bowl and lost, and was a playoff team this year and was considered a Super Bowl contender this year, separating themselves from the Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens, all of the other teams that we think of as competitive in this era, whether it's because they have an elite quarterback or an elite coach or an elite defense or some elite quality, or they're just flat out there and contending at the end of seasons every year. The Kansas City Chiefs have now separated themselves, and I think they were already the team that stood out, if for no other reason, because they have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, and then, of course, Travis Kelce as well. But by winning, by actually sealing the deal, I think that this is them separating themselves from all the other teams in their era. And it's really more about the Kansas City Chiefs chasing the dynasties of different eras. Like the Kansas City Chiefs are now looking at everybody else in the rear view, all of their peers in the rear view, and their peers are now like they're chasing ghosts. Like their peers are now teams that no longer have a say in the discussion, right? They are obviously the New England Patriots, the dynasty before them. Okay, Tom Brady and Bill Belichick's New England Patriots, the Dallas Cowboys of the 1990s, who won 3 Super Bowls in 4 seasons, right? So you're chasing them in some sense because they won 3 in 4 years and obviously a back-to-back. whereas you did 3 and 5 in a back-to-back, and in between there, you've also got a Super Bowl appearance and a loss in there. So you're chasing that era. You're chasing if you're the Kansas City Chiefs, you're chasing the 1980s San Francisco 49ers and the 1970s Pittsburgh Steelers. And in the discussion for just like the all-time great teams, the 90s Chicago Bulls, the 80s Los Angeles Lakers, the you know the Shaq Kobe era Los Angeles Lakers, right? Like you who obviously three-peated, like the great teams of all time, the obviously the Warriors of recent years. Okay, so you are now in an entirely different discussion with groups and teams that you don't actually compete directly against. That's the rarefied air that the Chiefs have found themselves in with this particular win. So I think that is the big overarching takeaway, is that now you just have to talk about the Chiefs entirely differently. Like like you no longer talk about them and compare them to the Ravens or the or the Bills or any of these other teams that they just consistently beat, right? So that's a big thing. On the game specifically, I find it somewhat fascinating how we discuss football, because the quarterback position is by far and away the most important and the most glamorous and the one that's most fun to talk about. So we talk a lot about Patrick Mahomes because he is arguably the greatest quarterback. Like, he's making a case to be the greatest quarterback of all time. Like, he's on pace to be the greatest quarterback of all time. There are some eye test things about him that make you already want to make the argument about him being the greatest quarterback of all time. And when you quarterback a dynasty, no doubt you're going to be in that sort of discussion. And then on the 49ers side, of course, Brock Purdy, the 49ers themselves have, and I'll get more on this in a second, but the 49ers themselves have been for a long time seemingly a quarterback away. They invest in a quarterback in Trey Lance, who turns out to not be the guy, but the least amount of investment that they put in quarterback in terms of draft capital. Picking Brock Purdy with the last pick in the draft a couple of years ago turns out to be the best move. And lo and behold, he is slightly above average and good enough to get you to a Super Bowl and have you competitive in one. So it is great conversation to think about the quarterbacks, but this game itself really was about two elite defenses colliding. Two elite defenses in the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers, defenses that we look at differently, okay, or that we think of in different ways, but also still two elite defenses. And then when it comes back to the quarterbacks, because the conversation always does come back to the quarterbacks, it became about how the quarterbacks responded to going up against elite defenses, right? But that, make no mistake about it, that's what this Super Bowl actually was. You had the Kansas City Chiefs, who I think by the time we got to the Super Bowl, we had, as a overall football public and overall football community, had accepted that the Kansas City Chiefs defense, different from previous years, that the defense was in large part the reason why the Chiefs were able to get to where they were able to get. Like, we acknowledged that the offense had seemingly taken a step back. It was the second year without Tyreek Hill, and you didn't seem to have weapons, wide receivers in particular, who were stepping up in ways that it seemed like they sort of did the previous year. And Patrick Mahomes didn't necessarily always play at the MVP level that he did the previous year. And Travis Kelce at times had taken a step back, or it seemed to take a step back in his play until the very end of the season, and certainly in the postseason. So there were questions about the Kansas City offense because it didn't necessarily look the way it had in previous years, but it didn't matter as much because the defense was so far and away better than it had ever been. And certainly among like the competition, like in comparison, is one of the better defenses in the league. I know I talked to my guy Ron Hughley, who hosts Sports Radio 610 The Drive, and afternoons has been a guest on this show. We talked several times about him believing, he's a Kansas City native, does a Chiefs podcast, Arrowhead Pride. He feels like this is the best, maybe the best Chiefs defense that he's ever seen, and possibly, one of the better defenses that we've seen in the league in the past decade or so. And they don't get talked about in that way because it's a team with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid on the other side of the ball. But that's absolutely what it turned out to be. And that continued to show itself up throughout the season and in the postseason. And then on the other side, you had the San Francisco 49ers, who were already and have already been acknowledged as a star-studded defense, expensive as hell. They've paid Joe. I was gonna call him Joey, but I was gonna do the same thing that they did on the broadcast and call Nick Bosa Joey Bosa, because that's what I do. That's what I do when I know who your brother is. I'm gonna call you by his name every time. But they gave all that money to Nick Bosa, $100 and something million, and they've got stars really at every level of the defense. When you think about it, between Bosa, and they traded for Chase Young, they've got Fred Warner. Man, that injury. Oh man, the injury to Greenlaw. Um, Goodness, man, having your Achilles snap as you are just simply trying to get on the field is just so far beyond anything that I said this on Twitter, that I'd never seen anything like that. Like, I've seen non-contact injuries. I've seen injuries that didn't really make a whole lot of sense. And you see a guy just kind of drop, and you're not really sure how it happened or why it happened, but you just figured that it was going to happen at some point if it happened that way. But Dre Greenlaw injuring himself as he's just kind of hopping up and down, getting himself ready to go from the sideline to the field, and then as soon as he takes off, man, that was wild. But he's another one that we're talking about in terms of star power on that defense. Of course, Travarius Ward, the cornerback, like they are the I know the safety has been out, but that is a defense that they've invested a lot of money in, that we have acknowledged for a very long time is really talented. And the issue with them, the reason why they had questions going into the game, was because that defense was not playing up to its potential. It was not playing up to standard for a while. And I think the big takeaway, or the thing that stood out to me about the game, was that both of those defenses showed up and lived up to the billing. That there was, I can remember seeing some conversation of, hey, this game is kind of boring. I'm not really into this game. This game's not really doing much for me. And that can sometimes happen when defenses show up, when elite defenses show up for a Super Bowl like that. And I thought that's what happened. I thought that was the football story of the game, that you go out there and you got the 49ers seemingly humming on offense on their first drive, but sure enough, and I'll get to Leo Chenal in a second, but sure enough, the Kansas City defense is making a play. And for all of the criticisms that you might have of the San Francisco 49ers from this game, and maybe even you'll look at the defense and say, I heard my guy Figgy say this on Sports Radio 610, that he thought it was just too easy the way Patrick Mahomes was able to march down the field on them in overtime. But I thought that if there was anybody that could go blameless in this game, it was that San Francisco 49ers defense. On the 49ers side, I thought it was the 49ers defense. I felt like they showed up. They made things difficult on Patrick Mahomes, and they forced them to make some plays there. And look, you hold Patrick Mahomes to under 20 points in regulation, I feel like you're cooking with grease, and you're expecting more from the from your offense, from your boy Wonder, who I will also get to in a second, with Kyle Shanahan, who I actually felt bad for, because I feel like he's a really good coach who seemingly who's either extremely unlucky or just can't get out of his own way. I can't decide which one it is. But that was the football story for me, was the two elite defenses colliding at a time when all we could do was focus on the quarterbacks, when all we could do was focus on Patrick Mahomes and all of the legacy talk with the Chiefs, which of course I led the show with. I think that is the main story overall, but just specific to the football game, these things overshadow, Brock Purdy, and is he elite? Is he a game manager? Is he a game changer? And all of this type of stuff that we got to get into. And I'm like, man, nah, it is the football stuff of this is, damn, look at that. Look at that Kansas City Chiefs defense fly around. Damn, look at that San Francisco 49ers defense fly around the way that they always have. And then when it comes back to the quarterbacks, because the discussion always does, it was about which quarterback was most equipped, best equipped to respond or to handle what an elite defense does to you. Like, which quarterback is able to make plays when the defense is just as good, if not better? Which quarterback is going to be able to do that? And in this game, it was Patrick Mahomes. It was Patrick Mahomes over Brock Purdy. And that's not a knock on Brock Purdy as much as it is a testament to Patrick Mahomes, and really underlining how important that position ultimately is, even when the defense is the main story. Even when the defense is the main story, the quarterback play turns out to be the story, because it comes down to which quarterback can execute against said defense. And I thought that was in large part the difference in this game. Brock Purdy was good. Patrick Mahomes was great. That was the difference. I thought that was the difference in the game, was who was most equipped to respond to the two elite defenses. Now, I want to give a shout out from this game to Leo Chenal, because since we're on the discussion on the topic of the defenses, I gotta say, I was expecting the Kansas City defense to play well. I was expecting, honestly, the San Francisco 49ers defense to play well, despite the fact that they hadn't. But I did not have Leo Chenal as my Kansas City Chiefs defensive player to watch in this game. He was not going to be my X factor in this game. And I understand that he's been on the team for a couple of years now, and he started just over half the games that they've played these last couple of years. 2 years in the NFL, 2 Super Bowls, a part of 2 Super Bowls, and now a Super Bowl hero without a doubt. But coming up with that strip on, or forcing that fumble on Christian McCaffrey on that first drive, huge play, because you're not expecting Christian McCaffrey, the offensive player of the year and arguably the best running back in all of football, to, I know he hadn't played in the Super Bowl up until that point, but you're not expecting him to cough the ball up in that situation. But that was less about, to me, I don't know, a running back is not going to make excuses or even want to tip his cap when he fumbles. Like, there's just no excuse for fumbling in the mind of a running back and most hardline football folks. But that was a hell of a play. Like, that's what you're supposed to be doing. Trying to get the ball out in that situation if you're Leo Chenal, and look at him showing up and making the play, and then blocking the extra point. Like, he had half a dozen tackles. I want to say it was something like half a dozen tackles, and he forces a fumble and blocks an extra point that keeps a game in one possession, that keeps it in as a 3-point game. Like, they go up by 4 if he doesn't block that extra point. And which, special teams, just as a side note, was a really interesting part of this game too, because you've got the obviously the block kick that I'm talking about there, but then the muff or the punt that goes off of the gunner or the 49ers teammate, and then they have to go after it, and it ends up being a fumble and sets up Mahomes and the Chiefs with a short field. You had you had a couple of you had the two longest field goals from both kickers, Moody and Bucker, the two longest field goals in Super Bowl history. And one of the field goals from Bucker was I don't want to call it a knuckleball. It was like a line drive that was nearly blocked. And you think about how things are different if that gets tipped. It was close to being tipped and probably should have been tipped for how low of a kick it was, but it's not tipped. So there's some luck involved there for the Kansas City Chiefs. And it's bad luck, poor luck, you could say, for the San Francisco 49ers, conversely. So, I mean, that was a fascinating tidbit and sidebar. But Leo Chennault, man, and I hope I'm saying his name right, because he's somebody that I heard of and knew was on this defense. But when I think about the Kansas City Chiefs defense, I think about Chris Jones. I think about Snead. I think about Trent McDuffie. I think about Willie Gay. I think about George Karlaftis. I think about Justin Reed because I know the guy haven't played for the Texans, but I don't really think much about Leo Chennault. I was not expecting that name to come up as much as it did, but I think it's unquestioned that they don't win this Super Bowl without him. They don't solidify this dynasty in the way that they have, and the way that we've talked about, or I've talked about so far on this podcast, without some second-year linebacker named Leo Chennault. And what a credit to Chennault, first of all, but a credit to that defense overall to have a level of depth to it, to where even the non-stars are able to make plays against, honestly, a star-studded 49ers offense. Which brings me to the 49ers. They've got to live with a lot of regret. I feel like the San Francisco 49ers got to live with a lot of regret, and it's got to do with this game, not just this game specifically, how it was managed, how it was coached, some of the decisions that were made. And I don't want to bail out the players here, just flat out how they played, how they didn't honestly show up in the critical moments the way that the Chiefs did, which is what these games ultimately come down to. But the 49ers, they've got to live with a lot of regret. The game aside for a second, and I'll get to the game, because there were some things that happened there. I know the big conversation piece is Kyle Shanahan in overtime sending Fred Warner out there for the coin toss, winning the coin toss, and then deciding to receive the ball instead of kicking it and taking it second, since the overtime rules and the playoffs are different and everybody's ensured a possession, gets to possess the ball. Some question about whether he was up on the rule or just flat out why he made the decision that he did. I'm going to get to that in a second. But the regret that I'm talking about, and that's part of it, part of the regret that I'm talking about. But when I can't watch them lose to Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs now for a second time in the Super Bowl. And not just lose to them for the second time in the Super Bowl, but after having a lead, after having a double-digit lead on Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl, and then lose to him, this time to solidify his status as a legend and the Chiefs' status as a dynasty in the NFL and amongst sports dynasties. So watch them lose to Patrick Mahomes, knowing that they could have had Patrick Mahomes, knowing that the only reason, the main reason why they have not won a Super Bowl since Patrick Mahomes has been in the NFL is because they don't have Patrick Mahomes. And not only do they not have Patrick Mahomes, but they haven't had anything close to it. Quarterback has been the missing piece, right? That's the novelty of the Brock Purdy story. Missing piece at quarterback. Oh, you found him with the last pick in the draft, maybe, right? That's the whole appeal of that story. The fact that they could have had Patrick Mahomes, but have not won a Super Bowl since Patrick Mahomes has been in the league. Obviously, haven't won the Super Bowl since '94, whenever it was, but have gone to the Super Bowl a couple of times and have not won it because the quarterback play, or at least in the Garoppolo year, certainly, but because they didn't have Patrick Mahomes, right? They lost both of them to Patrick Mahomes, and they could have had the guy. I could not be a San Francisco 49ers fan and watch that and continue to watch that. I just could not. I could not. We all know the history, right? Patrick Mahomes drafted in 2017. That's the first year of the Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch era. They had the second overall pick in that draft. Could have selected Patrick Mahomes. Nobody was talking about Patrick Mahomes as the number 2 pick in the draft at that point, I don't think. But they could have certainly scouted that and seen that if it had been there. But what did they do? They traded back a pick. The Bears move up a pick to select a quarterback at number 2. It's not Patrick Mahomes or Deshaun Watson. It's Mitch Trubisky. And there the 49ers are, having been able to trade down and still in a position to get Patrick Mahomes. And they pick Solomon Thomas. Solomon Thomas, who is going to be able to more than likely play in the NFL for as long as he wants to, or as long as he decides his body can hold up or whatever, and will get a nice NFL pension when it's all said and done, but is not orchestrating or leading nobody's dynasty. They could have had Patrick Mahomes. The 49ers not only are losing to him in the Super Bowl, but could have had him. It's just if I was a fan of that team, I would not be able to get over it. I was listening to some Bay Area radio Monday morning, and I like to check out their show whenever something big is happening in the Bay Area, whether it's Warriors related, 49ers related, whatever's going on out there. I'm a big fan of the Morning Roast with Bonte Hill and Joe Shasky, I believe. Bonte Hill and Joe Shasky, the Morning Roast on 95.7 The Game. I check those guys out whenever something's going on out there. And sometimes I just check in every night because I think they do a really, really good show. And I mentioned that because I want to credit Bonte with this. And I want to get the reaction of Houston sports fans, if there's some crossover here between Texans fans and Rockets fans. He compared the 49ers in their relation to the Kansas City Chiefs to the Houston Rockets in their relationship to the Golden State Warriors. As in, the 49ers to the Chiefs are what the Rockets are to the Golden State Warriors, as being a footnote in their history, a footnote in their historic run to become a modern dynasty, and arguably one of the better dynasties ever. Certainly the best team of their era and one of the best teams ever. That's what the Rockets are. People don't think about them like this as the team that, James Harden has talked about as kind of this choke artist and kind of gained this reputation as a diva after he left Houston, for the way he left Houston, the way he left Brooklyn, and then ultimately the way he left Philly and all of that. But we would talk about them totally different if the Warriors weren't the Warriors. If the Warriors were just kind of another team that won a championship but not a dynasty, They didn't have Steph, KD for that stretch. If they weren't dynastic, the Rockets were good enough to win a championship. And that's what the 49ers feel like, a team that's good enough to win a championship, but they're not able to do it because they ran into that. There were comparisons to the Utah Jazz, like, hey, this is a team that was good enough to win a championship, but it ran into Michael Jordan's Bulls, one of the greatest teams in sports history. Well, and I could see that. I was like, man, first of all, it's messed up that that's the way, we're kind of viewed as losers. That stretch and that run that had its ups and downs, but was objectively a success, is viewed in other parts as a failure, depending on your perspective of it. But imagine if the Rockets, imagine if the reason why is because you passed on the main player who is the reason why you're losing, the main player that's beating you. Like, imagine if that's the reason. I would not be able to stomach it. I wouldn't. Like, you think about the 2009 draft, and the Rockets were not in a position to draft Steph Curry, right? So it's not like the Rockets passed on Steph Curry or anything like that, right? But the 49ers were in a position to take Patrick Mahomes, to take who a lot of people now are just straight up calling Jordan, and they passed on him twice. That's the way I look at it. When you trade out of the pick and then pick again, that to me, those are two conscious decisions: the trade and then the actual selection that you make. By not picking second, you're passing on whatever player does get picked second, which in this case was Mitch Trubisky, but could have been Patrick Mahomes, right? I'm sure the Chicago Bears fan community is kicking itself. And then when you do pick third, you pick Solomon Thomas. They've got to live with all sort of regret about this, all sort of regret, and that's why I make this point before I even get into the game, because I'm just like, yo, maybe none of this even matters if you have the right guy on your side. If you have the dude, going back to my earlier point about responding to elite defenses colliding, and then when it comes back to the quarterback, which quarterback is best equipped to respond? Doesn't matter if you got the right guy, but they got to live with that regret. Got to. And then in the game, and let's just get to the main point here, because I don't want this to go too long. I've already taken up enough of your time, and I appreciate y'all for listening. But the decision to take the ball first in overtime, which in the moment struck me as odd, but not necessarily egregious. Like, I wasn't just really processing it all until I started to see the reaction. But even in the moment, I thought, no, I think I would want the ball. I think I would want the ball second, and this is why, because the discussion has come down to a great bit down to analytics, because that's what we talk about when we go into these sort of game management situations. We talk about, what do the numbers say? What do the analytics tell you to do? And even when Kyle Shanahan addressed it after the game, he mentioned that they had studied the analytics on it, or they had run the analytics on it, and it said, and I don't necessarily buy this. I don't have access to whatever numbers or probabilities that they're going with, but his logic was that they did it this way so they could, because they wanted the third possession, which I don't fully get the third possession part, because you're not guaranteed a third possession. Like, each team is guaranteed one possession. So I don't understand a strategy based off of your second possession if you're only guaranteed the one. Okay, both teams guaranteed one possession, but just the one possession, right? So that part of it I didn't fully understand. But for me, it didn't come down to analytics because I don't have access to the analytics, and I don't have access to whatever the math is on it. I haven't done any math on this. I'm just using logic and good sense. Okay, that's all I got. That's all I got on me right now. And I thought, man, if I'm insured a possession and they're insured a possession, I'd want to go second because I'd want to have all the information that I possibly can for how my one possession is going to go, what my exact goal is, what am I trying to accomplish. Obviously, every drive, you ideally want to score a touchdown. You're trying to get points. You're trying to get a touchdown, in pretty much every scenario, in most scenarios. And certainly in this one, the goal, no matter if you got it first or second, was going to always be to get a touchdown. But to me, the benefit in getting the ball second is knowing exactly what you need. The downside of getting the ball first, which is why if I'd won the toss, I wouldn't want to get the ball first, is because you don't know exactly what you need. You are going down there to try to score a touchdown because why the hell wouldn't you? Settling for 3 points, though, gets to be a little bit tricky when you go first because you don't know. And it's hard to say no to the 3 points because you feel like you got to go down there and get something. But you don't know if you get the ball first, if 3 points is going to be enough to win the game. If you get the ball second, depending on how things went on defense, you do know. Like to me, that first possession can trick you into thinking a field goal is more valuable than it actually is because you don't know if it's going to be enough on the other side. It means effectively that you have to limit the other team to a field goal or less. You know that. But can you do that? Can you do that? You don't know. You don't know. Go on defense first and find out, hey, can I stop this team? Can I limit them to a field goal? Can I not help it? Is it Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, and are they just going to score a touchdown anyway? What do I need? What do I need to win this game? And you don't know the answer to that if you get the ball first. Had they decided to defer and the Chiefs got the ball first, they would have been shit out of luck in that kind of way. And well, we lost the toss. We got to go down here and execute, not knowing exactly what we need to win the game. We don't know how our defense is going to respond to them. We don't know if they're going to stop them, if they're going to give up a touchdown, if they're going to limit them to a field goal. We don't know. We just got to go out there and ball. Downside of losing the toss. In this case, these Sun Guns won the toss and decided to fly blind, to go in blind. And so they got to live with some regret there. I know that Shanahan justified it by saying that, hey, we ran the analytics and this is what it said. I'm skeptical of that. But even if so, you still got to you still got to live with some regret on that. Because logic dictated that when you got the ball, you wanted to have all the information. You needed to have all the information that you possibly could. And you didn't. You chose not to. To me, that is inexcusable. That is a fatal decision on the part of Kyle Shanahan. As great of an offensive mind as he is, as much as he has sort of changed the game by taking earlier concepts and expanding on them. I know he didn't invent the West Coast offense. I know he didn't invent the Shanahan Kubiak offense or anything like that. I know he didn't invent it, but he is like the modern architect of it. He is kind of the He's the head of this coaching tree that everybody's trying to get, right? Whenever there's a coaching opening, do they have some sort of connection to Kyle Shanahan or Sean McVay, whose connection is to Kyle Shanahan, right? Like I'm not taking away any of that from him, but in these big moments, and that's been the criticism when I'm listening to the Bay Area discussion on radio, man, as great as he is, as great as he's been for the 49ers, man, in big moments, this is twice now that they've been up by double digits in a Super Bowl with the 49ers and lost. It's 3 times now with Shanahan calling the plays that he's been up double digits in a Super Bowl and lost, if you count his time as offensive coordinator with the Atlanta Falcons when they lost that Super Bowl to the New England Patriots in Houston several years back. They've got to live with some regret for the past and the present. Not taking Patrick Mahomes back when they had the opportunity to do so. And then not giving him the ball in overtime when the rules dictated that it would benefit you to do so. Man, dude, like I thought about it like this. Could you imagine if, and this is a little bit different, and I know I made the cross sport comparison to the Rockets and Warriors, and I know cross sport comparisons are never perfect, but I thought that one was pretty close. Could you imagine? This one is not perfect, but it's pretty close. Could you imagine if several years down the line, the Houston Texans and the Carolina Panthers are playing in the Super Bowl and the Texans beat the Panthers twice? Whether it's Bryce Young as their quarterback or not, the fact that they could have had C.J. Stroud, and then that turns out to be the guy to beat them to keep them from winning a Super Bowl twice. You have to live with some regret after that. And then in this game where they kicked a field goal in overtime because they decided to take the ball first, you think if they had given the ball to the Chiefs first and the Chiefs had gone down there and scored a touchdown, that they would have wasted their time with a field goal? No, because the information would have dictated that wasn't good enough. But instead, they elected to not get said information. Man, I said this on Twitter that I would, when I was kind of watching some of the reaction, I was watching some of the pain from 49ers fans, some of the trolling of people against 49ers fans, and then just the overall conversation of it. I was like, man, look, I'd rather be in this position than not. I'd rather be the 49ers where, the team is at least competitive and relevant at this time of year and is going to the Super Bowl and just losing to a dynastic squad, losing to a possible GOAT, than to not be in the conversation at all. But then when I sat back and thought about it some more, I was like, yeah, but this one is different. This one is different because it feels like you left a lot of meat on the bone, from the fact that you could have had the guy that you're losing to the ways in which that you gave the game away. Just gave the game away. You think Patrick Mahomes need help winning? Andy Reid, Travis Kelce, the Chiefs, you think they need help? Why would you help them? Why would you do it? I don't get it. Now, on Brock Purdy, I want to say that I thought Brock Purdy played a game that was fine. And Brock Purdy, to me, was not the problem. Brock Purdy was not the problem for the San Francisco 49ers in a way that quarterback has historically been the problem for the 49ers over this last half decade plus that we're talking about here, this window here in which they decided not to draft Patrick Mahomes. Brock Purdy was not the problem. He also was not the solution. And here's what I mean by that. Now, I think this is really important in the Brock Purdy discussion because so much of it is about how good is he? Is he elite? Is he a game manager or is he a game changer? Look, I don't think that there's anything wrong with, and I think he's got some. To me, the interesting part about these quarterbacks is you might view Patrick Mahomes this season specifically as a game changer who was most impactful at times when he managed the game. Like we already know about his game changing ability. We've seen enough of it. But the fact that he was able to manage the game at times and allow the defense to be the strength of the team and not do too much and things of that nature. He went that long stretch without turning the ball over or throwing a pick until he did in the Super Bowl, but they ended up being able to overcome it and all that. Like game changer who has game changing ability but knows when to manage the game. And then I thought that Brock Purdy, because of the system, because of the weapons, because of the play caller, I thought Brock Purdy inherently was, and obviously being the last pick in the draft does say something about your talent level, I believe, or your perceived talent level, certainly. I think he's inherently a game manager because of the way that the team is set up. But the reason why he showed himself to be above average or possibly special is because he does at times make some game-changing plays. He's got a set on him. Brock Purdy has got some guts, man. He's a tough dude, or I'd say a gutsy dude, okay? Because, and this has been pointed out, game manager or not, he don't view himself as that. He does not. He views himself as a playmaker, as somebody that can go out there and make plays, and he's not scared to go out there and try to make them. He's not. Even if there's a ceiling on the type of plays he can make, how good he actually is, he doesn't view it that way. And I think that there is a benefit to that level. If you have a certain talent level, I think there can be a benefit to that level of delusion. But Brock Purdy was the game manager, conversely, whereas, Patrick Mahomes is the game changer who changed the game by managing it. Brock Purdy was the game manager who could make game-changing plays. They were sort of the inverse of each other. But I thought the issue here in the Super Bowl was that the system quarterback could not credibly rely on the system. And I think it's okay, it's such a headline, it's such a hot topic. Game manager versus game changer. Is he elite? Is he not? Is he a system quarterback or is he, a guy? Is he the system, right? I think it's okay to be a system quarterback so long as the system does not fail you. Wasn't nothing wrong with being a system quarterback. Like I wouldn't complain if I was Brock Purdy about having Kyle Shanahan as my play caller, one of the better play callers of his generation, and the best running back in football to hand the ball off and throw the ball to. One of the more unique weapons in football in Deebo Samuel, who I can hand the ball off and throw the ball to. Perhaps one of the more underrated weapons in Brandon Ayuk, who I can throw the ball to. And then George Kittle, who is widely considered the second best tight end in football. And then an elite defense on the other side when I'm not on the field. I wouldn't be mad about that if I was Brock Purdy. I'm like, hey, let's go. That's a system. That's a system that I can get down with, a system that I can believe in as long as I go out there and make plays and not hurt us. But then what if the system fails? What if the play caller in this particular instance is not elite? In this particular game is not elite. What if he gets tight? What if instead of leaning on that running back who's the best in the game, he throws the ball 6 or 7 times to open the second half when they've shown an ability to run the ball, when you've shown an ability to run the ball with Christian McCaffrey? Fumble aside. What if Debo Samuel, George Kittle, and Brandon Ayuk just don't don't show up that day, or they're locked down by an elite defense. What if the coach, who everybody thinks so highly of, has some kind of fatal flaw in critical moments, and in this particular critical moment makes a fatal decision by deciding to take the ball first in overtime? What if the system fails the system quarterback? Is that the quarterback's fault? Is the quarterback the problem when the whole idea is to build this infrastructure, or to have this infrastructure already built around a quarterback who can just come in and run it? You know, I'm doing this podcast right now. What if the mic stopped working? You know what I mean? Like you it's a team game, man. It's a team game. And Brock Purdy, to me, is not the solution in the way that Patrick Mahomes is. He's not the solution in the way that, you know, the greats have been in the past. But he wasn't the problem either, I didn't think. I think the problem was that the actual solution didn't solve anything. You're supposed to have all of these weapons and this play caller that knows how to carve up a defense. And if we're being frank about it, Kyle Shanahan, who going into this game, you know, and I think still is viewed as an elite offensive mind and an elite play caller, an elite coach. He was the worst play caller on the field in this Super Bowl out of the four. Andy Reid called a better game on the Chiefs' offensive side. Spags called a better game on the Chiefs' defensive side, head to head against Kyle Shanahan. And if I was Steve Wilkes, I wouldn't hold my head about anything, about the kind of game that I called, or how my side of the ball played, how my defense played. Chase Young showed up in the Super Bowl when there was some talk about, hey, has that trade just not working out? There he was playing for you, balling. I didn't I didn't look at this game and come away from it thinking that Brock Purdy was anything close to the problem. And I think if his coach had coached better, and if his weapons had shown up and played better and played to the level of the defense that they were going against, that, you know, this would be a different an entirely different conversation, or could be an entirely different conversation, because it is going to get lost with all of everything else that we talked about. It is going to get lost that at times the 49ers seem to be dominating that game. It did, until the muff punt, or, you know, the however you want to look at that. I wouldn't call it a muff, but you know what I mean. Until they turned it over on that punt. Then, of course, overtime happens. There's the block kick, I should say. And overtime happens. There are some key moments, obviously, from the game. But, yeah, man, could have been different. Could have been a lot different. I do think, before I move on to Radio Row, I do think that this is a fascinating time for the Texans. I do. And we'll get into more of this throughout the offseason, what their potential is, where they stack up against teams in the AFC and the NFL at large. But, man, the blueprint is there. You need a quarterback that can put you on his back when it comes time, but has the awareness and sense to not do too much and to not try to when it's not necessary. And you need a defense that can make things hard on an elite quarterback. Like it sounds really, really simple, but that's what the Chiefs, that's what the Chiefs are, you know, and That's not just to say, hey, go get Patrick Mahomes. No, it doesn't have to be Patrick Mahomes. It's just got to be like I still to this point about Brock Purdy not being a problem. I think the 49ers can win a Super Bowl with Brock Purdy. I do. A couple things go wrong for the Chiefs, or a couple things go wrong for one of them other AFC teams. Like probably never gonna pick a Brock Purdy led team to beat Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, uh, Joe Burrow, maybe even not Lamar Jackson, C.J. Stroud, like these guys in the AFC. But that's not to say that they can't win a Super Bowl with Brock Purdy. I think he's just good enough to where if everything else around him is what it's supposed to be, that they can pull it off. I think worse quarterbacks than Brock Purdy have won the Super Bowl. So you think about the Texans having a quarterback who I can objectively say is better than Brock Purdy. Man, let's see what they about, man. Let's see what the Texans are about this offseason, because this is, in my mind, the best time that there has ever been to be a Texans fan. And speaking of, my man Sean Pendergast put this on my mind last week after the NFL honor ceremony last Thursday, where C.J. Stroud won Offensive Rookie of the Year, Will Anderson won Defensive Rookie of the Year, and a lot of us biased Houston folks think that DeMeco Ryans was snubbed out of the Coach of the Year, but it's all right. Andre Johnson got into the Hall of Fame, became the first Texans player to be inducted or to be named an inductee into the Hall of Fame. Will be inducted, I guess, later on in the year. So big, 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 big stuff. I was there at the NFL honor ceremony to take all of this in. And look, I didn't even think about it like this in the moment, but Sean Pendergast put it perfectly as the best night in Texans history. I was like, man, I wasn't thinking about it like that, but I don't see how you can argue that it isn't. You get your first Hall of Fame inductee. It ain't like you ever been to a AFC championship game, right? So it's not like you ever really actually won anything. But on this particular night, on the heels of one of your more successful seasons ever, okay, I've talked about this on Sports Radio 610 with Ron and Tyler Milner, this being a top 5 and really top 3 or 4, but certainly a top 5 season in Texans history. On the heels of that, you get your first Hall of Fame inductee in Andre Johnson. You sweep the Rookie of the Year awards, which you have not done before. And you've never won the Offensive Rookie of the Year, because I think the only rookies of the year that the Texans have had were defensive players. I'm pretty sure Stroud is the first offensive player to win it. Y'all check me on that if I'm wrong, but I think the only ones to win it were Brian Cushing, DeMeco Ryans, Brian Cushing, and then now C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure that's correct. So you sweep them for the first time in the Rookie of the Year award. And then just to have DeMeco there in the conversation. When was the last time, as a Texans fan, you had a coach that you really thought should be in the conversation for Coach of the Year? When was the last time you felt that way? Or the last time you felt like your coach not winning Coach of the Year was an injustice, was a miscarriage of justice? It's good times, man. It's hard to argue with my man Sean Pendergast on that point about it being the greatest night in Texans history. But let me go over this with y'all real quick on what my Radio Row experience was like. First of all, it was my first Radio Row experience. So I'd never done it before. I thought it was really cool that the first experience would be in Vegas, a place like Las Vegas, a fun place, a vibrant place, not just some random NFL city, but Vegas. Okay. So that part of it, like, really cool, really cool. Also, only my second time in Vegas ever. And the first time / last time that I went to Vegas was 12 years before, almost 12 years ago. And to me, in today's day and age, if you only go to Vegas once and then you go over a decade without going again, to me, it's basically like you never been before. Because being there, I saw things that I recognized, the hotel that I stayed at before and some parts of downtown that I had been in before. Like there were things that I recognized about Vegas being there. Of course, like the stuff like the MGM Grand and Mandalay Bay, some of the buildings that stand out and things like that. Hadn't been there since the Sphere had been built, so that was kind of cool to see. I didn't go inside, but it was kind of cool to see from outside. But it is basically as if you've never been. So I get to Vegas Sunday night. I get to Vegas Sunday night thinking, you know what? I know we got to work tomorrow. I know our first show here is tomorrow, but I'm going to really take advantage of this first night of being here because I do know that Vegas wears on people and eventually I'm going to be tired and eventually I ain't going to be wanting to do all of this Vegas stuff that you do. So I get there almost immediately, hit up the flower shop because that's my thing, right? That's the thing about Vegas that I'm more into than the gambling. Okay, I'm just gonna tell y'all this off top. I don't have no gambling stories for y'all, not because I'm anti-gambling or I got some kind of like moral objection to gambling. I just, for me and my personality, I don't want to get to a point where I gamble and like it and make it a habit, make it be a part of my routine. Because for one, the- again, my personality, I feel like I might end up liking it too much. But also, just as a concept, I feel like a sucker when I gamble. And I'm not calling anybody who does gamble a sucker. I think some of y'all might be suckers actually, but some of y'all are better at it than others. And I think if you're able to make some coin, make some change off of your gambling habits, then more power to you. I'm not hating on that. I just prefer to when I throw money away because I'm not above this. I'll set some money on fire. I certainly did in Vegas. But when I throw money away, I at least prefer to be getting something back. I think I'm too sore of a loser when it comes to money. Too sore of a loser to accept losing bets or losing at the blackjack table or losing at the slots. Like it's just not good enough for me to put money into something for a definite maybe. Maybe you'll double this up. Maybe you'll get some more money out of this, but maybe not. Nah, when I spend my money in a frivolous way, I at the very least get something tangible back for sure for said frivolous purchase, for said frivolous spending. And so I prefer it that way. I had plenty of other things about Vegas that I liked and really just the scene and the people watching, but also, you know, when I went, like I mentioned, it was over a decade ago. It was 2012. There were no flower shops in this way in Vegas. You couldn't just Uber to the flower shop and Uber back, or just straight up be outside gardening in the streets the way you can now. So when I go to states that are legal to do that, that is one of the things that I'm intrigued by that I like to sort of check out. So I did that immediately. That was dope. My first, I would break it down like this. My first 3 nights were really fun. Did the flower shop on Sunday night, and also posted up at a Tex-Mex restaurant in the hotel. We stayed at the Link on the Strip. Posted up at the hotel with Clint Sterner and Ron Hughley, and we had a good time doing that. Second day, same thing or a similar thing. Um, did this Landry Locker, talking about going to the flower shop. We took this long ass walk. We went to a place called Cookies where we Ubered there, but then took the long ass walk from Cookies back to our hotel, which In the beginning, I was down with, and then halfway through, thought I was gonna die, and definitely impacted my energy uh, for the next day or so, for sure. Talk about the 49ers living with some regret. I definitely regret not saying, nah, man, this is on Monday. Nah, man, let's go ahead and take the Uber back. Because also, Monday night, got to do opening night where I talked to Kyle Shanahan about his time with the Texans. Talked to him about, y'all might have seen this even on Sports Radio 610 social media, about his time with the Texans and about D'Amico Ryans and just responding to the success that D'Amico had and all that kind of thing. Talked to Fred Warner about it. Got to catch up with Justin Reed, Charles Omenihu. Talked to Tradarius Ward. I hope I'm saying that boy's first name right. It's a tough one. But y'all know who I'm talking about. Ward, the cornerback for the 49ers who played under D'Amico the year before. Talked to that cat uh, and did just a lot of mingling and networking. I met Bill Roden and Orlando Ledbetter, two OGs in the game, in the sports writing game. And certainly Roden, the author of $40 Million Slaves, long time New York Times guy. Been with ESPN for a little while now, but is like an icon in the sports writing business in the industry, and certainly for Black writers, for Black media. So that was got to stand and talk to Bill Roden and Orlando Ledbetter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution for a couple of minutes. That was really dope. And I would be here all day if I just started rattling off all of the faces and names and people that I met, and obviously I saw Jerry Rice, Michael Irvin, Robert Kraft, Jerry Jones. I mean, you name it, he was there. But obviously everybody who won an award, of course, talked to CJ Stroud on NFL Honors Night. Like it was like just an overall dope experience. But I was talking about Monday. Monday was cool because I actually got to be on the field and do the opening night stuff that a lot of you guys probably saw on TV. I was there for it. Really dope. Tuesday, I think, was the media party, or was Tuesday the media party? I think it was. Really dope. It was I can't remember the name of the place, but it was on something that looked like a boat, but it wasn't. It was on land, and it had like 3 levels, it was the biggest party that I'd ever been to. The biggest party I'd ever been to. Food, drinks, just everywhere. I probably stuffed myself in hors d'oeuvres more than I ever have. Like 8 more in samples than I did in than I ever have in some meals. Really, really dope scene. Enjoyed that. And so that's Tuesday night. So by Wednesday, I hit a wall. Wednesday could have been the day where I played beer pong with Ron and some strangers, but I feel like by Wednesday I had finally hit the wall. Not a lot of recollection from Wednesday, but then Thursday came, and I got to tell y'all about sneaking in NFL Honors before I get out of here, man. I had a credential for the red carpet at NFL Honors, which would allow me to interview, photograph, and video basically everybody on the red carpet. But I'm there specifically in this case for the Texans that are involved, right? The McNair's on the red carpet. D'Amico Ryans is on the red carpet. And of course, CJ Stroud and Will Anderson on the red carpet. I believe John Weeks was as well, with him being the Man of the Year nominee. So you've got all of these local angles on the red carpet, these people for me to be there to interview. But I wasn't really sure beyond that what exactly I was supposed to have access to after the red carpet. Like that part was never exactly clear to me. And then when I get there, apparently there was this odd window of when you could pick up a credential. Like there was a cutoff point and then a reopening point to pick up the credential. But the issue there is, in between there is people on the red carpet. Like if you had waited, you'd have missed. Like if you wait in between their window, you're gonna miss what you're there for, right? But how you gonna go pick up the credential if you've been spending the whole day working? If you've been on Radio Row all day, when was you supposed to go get it? right? So there was this real odd kind of like conflict there, and I'm standing there, trying to get this credential, and eventually we're able to get in contact with the person who has it, and we get it and everything. But I'm standing there, Diana Rossini, formerly of ESPN, currently with the Athletic. I took a picture with her and got to meet Diana Rossini, who I think I've been around before, but it just never introduced myself to or met. But we were both kind of standing there in the same situation of, hey, we've got access to this red carpet, but our credentials not here because there's this weird window that doesn't account for when we get here, for when we can reasonably get here and still make it for the red carpet. So that was an odd feeling, and I pointed out because not just because it was odd, but because it was almost a deterrent. Like I was almost to the point, if I hadn't gotten in touch with that PR person, to the point where I was going to Uber back to my hotel because there was no point in me being there without that credential. The credential that I had was for Radio Row and apparently not good enough to get me on the red carpet. I was going to go back to the house. But fortunately, I did not. And I ended up getting really good content on the red carpet with the Texans folks that I mentioned. But not just that, I was able to slide my way into, and it was at Sports World, Sports Resort, something like that. I think Sports World, uh, on the Strip. I was able to slide my way from the red carpet and straight into the venue without a peep, without anybody noticing. I went from, and apparently I was not supposed to be there. I just did not know it because nobody told me otherwise. But apparently my credential was only supposed to allow me access to the red carpet. I wasn't even given access to the media workroom based off of what my credential was allowing me to do. My credential was saying, hey, do this red carpet, and when the red carpet is over, you need to take your ass home. That's what my credential said. But didn't nobody up there say that? Did nobody at none of the security, none of the people working there was like, hey man, this credential don't let you into the venue where we got all these free drinks and more free hors d'oeuvres for, like, the Lamar Jacksons of the world, for the McNairs of the world. I walk into the venue basically with the McNairs. And I don't think they are, with the McNairs, with D'Amico Ryans, with Will Anderson. And they're not like, they know who I am, but they don't know whether I'm have access to be there or not. Like, that's not, they're not there for their guests. They're not there for that. So just there I am. Nobody telling me that, hey, you're not supposed to be here, or hey, scan your badge to see if you're supposed to be here. It was just like, hey, walk in, here's a drink, there's the bar, tip the bartender, here's some hors d'oeuvres. And so there I was for the whole like 30, 40 minutes of snoozing in between the red carpet and the actual show starting. And I got to stay in there. Okay. Now I didn't have a seat. And this is when it should have occurred to me that I wasn't supposed to be there. Okay. This is when the innocence, I'm not able to claim innocence any longer. When the show starts, I realized that there's nowhere for me to sit. And mind you, I had tried to get into the media workroom earlier. I was going to set up my laptop and do some work, and my credential wouldn't let me in there. So I turned around, went back inside the venue, right down the red carpet like I was allowed to, but then inside the venue like I wasn't supposed to. And then when the actual show started, I realized, hey, I don't have anywhere to sit. But I also needed to charge my phone. And so I decided to just set my laptop up, plug it up right there in the lobby on the second floor of this, where the NFL honor ceremony was happening, on the second floor, and just sat there with my laptop plugged up, watching the show from a screen right outside right there in the lobby. So right outside of where everybody's at, and was there for pretty much the entire show. That's when it should have occurred to me, though, that I wasn't supposed to be there because my credential did not allow me into the workroom and I didn't have a seat for the actual event. I was kind of in no man's land, but nobody was checking me. It's people that work there that seeing me set my laptop up. Nobody's saying like, "Hey, man, this isn't really what we do. This isn't okay." Nobody, no, nothing, no apprehension, reprehension, no apprehension or like discipline, no attention to it at all. So by the time the main awards are done, CJ Stroud gets his award, Will Anderson gets his award, D'Amico Ryans gets snubbed. I'm like, all right, I can go out for a smoke. I can step outside real quick, take a break, and come back. But I wasn't exactly sure how the reentry situation worked. I wasn't exactly sure if I'd be allowed to come back in if I did it like this. So I asked somebody. I asked innocently and genuinely asked one of the security guys, "Hey, if I go out for a smoke, okay?" Because this was, obviously you can smoke in a lot of areas in Las Vegas, but this wasn't. This is too nice of that. There's money in here, man. You got to go find the smoking section. Can I go outside and smoke and then come back in? Well, y'all let me do that. Is that okay? The guy didn't know, so he goes to his boss. And so me, him, and his boss are there having this discussion, and the boss is kind of piecing things together, like trying to figure out exactly who I am and like what exactly I'm doing there and what my access is. Because if I'm a guest, I think the answer is if I'm a guest, somebody with a seat, then yeah, I can go out and have a smoke and then come back in. But if I'm media who only has access to the red carpet and the red carpet event is over with, long over with, then what exactly am I still doing here? And that's what we came down to. He said, "Sir, do you have a seat?" I said, "No, sir." He says, "Well, I don't think you're supposed to be here. I think your credential just afforded you access to the red carpet, but I don't think you're still supposed to be here, sir." I said, "Well, that checks out. That makes a lot of sense. Because I didn't feel like I was supposed to be here either. I didn't. I didn't feel like I was supposed to be here. I just realized that nobody was kicking me out. And I was enjoying the drinks. I had enough money in my pocket to tip the bartender and not feel like I was freeloading. So I drank the drinks, had me about, and I wasn't driving, right? I'm Ubering everywhere. So I had me about 3 Crown and Cokes, a couple of sliders, and I enjoyed myself. Took pictures for people. "Hey, can you take our picture in front of the?" Yeah, sure. Chatted it up with the McNairs. Chatted it up some. This is after the interviews. Chatted it up with D'Amico Ryans a little bit more. Saw Will Anderson again. Dapped him up. I'm just in there in the mix. Ran into Tyrod Taylor, who we used to cover with the Texans. Was right there next to I saw Mike Town. I don't know if this is white, whatever. I don't know what his relationship status is, but saw him there with his woman, who is clearly his woman. Just kind of just off to the side, just looking around. Gail King just walked right by me. Flavor Flav, everybody. I'm just right there with everybody. I'm like, "Hey, here I am. I don't have a seat, but ain't nobody told me to leave. Ain't nobody told me to leave." So yeah, I got to accidentally attend the NFL honor ceremony in Las Vegas, despite the fact that I was not supposed to. And for the most part, this was an innocent and honest mistake until it wasn't. And to the credit to the security guy who did not kick me out, because by this point I've been there for pretty much the whole show. I ain't caused no problems, no trouble. And all I wanted to know is if I could go out and have a smoke and come back in. And I think he took a liking to me, just my personality. Sometimes that happens. I can be a likable guy at times. And he allowed me to go back in there, knowing damn well I wasn't supposed to be. He said, man, my people were supposed to stop you. My workers were supposed to stop you, man. They didn't. But he could tell I wasn't no problem. And he ain't had no problem with it. He just wasn't gonna let me go out and come back in. But I could stay in. And I did. I did. I did. I did. And I had a good time, man. I had a good time. Radio Row overall was a success. I thought, right, look, there are always things that you'll look back on and say, hey, this could have been better. When I say a success, I think it was overall a success. I think there were also some lessons learned from the time there. But just in terms of the experience, man, it was great. I do know that that there were ups and downs throughout it because of the weather. I'd never been, obviously it's only my second time in Vegas, but I hadn't been there when it rained. And it's worse. It is worse than Houston when it rains. Just fortunately enough for them, it does not rain as often as it does in Houston. But yeah, man. Look, this podcast has gone way too long with me talking about this. I probably should have broken these up into two. Did one talking about the game and did another one talking about Radio Row. But look, here I am. Here we are at the end, hour and some change. I done gave you everything for the most part that I think about the game and what I'm willing to give you about the Las Vegas experience. The best part about it was me sneaking into something without even trying. That was it. Oh, the what is the word? Transient, unhoused gentleman that found his way into Mandalay Bay with myself and Sean Pendergast. That happened before I snuck into the NFL honor. So I thought the irony there was great. Like, you got this heavily secured situation going on in Mandalay Bay where you got to go out of your way to get to where we was at, man. You had to get checked twice by security, and you had to walk like the long way from like just to get to Radio Row. Like, you needed to be in some kind of physical shape to do this and be able to get through multiple security. And somehow this guy who was clearly and obviously unhoused had made his way all the way up to where myself and Sean Pendergast were in the media workroom outside of Radio Row. It was the damnedest thing. It was like, yo, I don't know how. And I told people, I was like, man, if my black ass was unhoused and looking like that, I would not have been able to make it up here like he did. I don't know how that happened. And then sure enough, now to be fair, wearing a really nice suit and looking pretty good and pretty spiffy, I was able to sneak my black ass into the NFL honor ceremony when I wasn't supposed to. So the ball don't lie. Really good week. Epic Super Bowl. Congrats to the Kansas City Chiefs on their dynasty. I would absolutely hate to be a San Francisco 49ers fan. I'm totally changing my tune on that from what I tweeted the night before about how I prefer to be there than not. Nah, man, I wouldn't want to be the 49ers in this situation, knowing that I could have had the guy that continues to beat me in the Super Bowl. But hey, that's life. That is the situation. And this has been the B Block Podcast with Brandon Scott. Again, make sure that you subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure that you rate and leave a review. And also tell a friend. Until next time, y'all be good.